Hi, Primary F. Today I am going to do a short lesson about multiplying fractions and letting you know about a few key ideas that we are going to be developing throughout this unit. So first, I want to take a poll question for everyone. So the question is, when multiplying by fractions, is your product going to be larger than the two factors being multiplied, or do you think it's going to be smaller? When we look back at multiplication in general, we have one factor 3 multiplied by another factor 4, and that equals 12. So when you multiply by a whole number by another whole number, your product is going to be larger than the factors that are being multiplied. But now I want to look at two fractions being multiplied by each other. So we have a fraction multiplied by a fraction. Are their product going to be smaller or bigger than those two factors, 1/2 and 1/4? If you guys said smaller, you are correct. So the product is smaller than the factors. So the answer to this multiplication problem is 1/8, which is smaller than 1/4 and smaller by 1/2. When we multiply one fraction by a whole number, we have a way that we want to talk about and how we want to think about these equations. So instead of saying 1/4 multiplied by 4, we want to think of it as 1/4 of 4. So we're thinking a part of the whole in this. So a part of the whole number, 1/4 of 4. We have two fractions multiplied by each other. We would say it's 1/4 of 1/3. So keeping it in the same order, we're just changing that multiplication sign to of, because we're thinking of a part of a fraction. Okay, moving on to an example. If you said of, you are correct. So we want to think of it as 1/3 of 3. We're taking a part of the whole number. So first, when we think about it, 3 is going to be what we start with because we're taking a part of the whole. So we want to start with 3 whole rectangles. But now we need to look at that numerator. How many parts do we want of the 3? And it is 1. So I highlighted one of these rectangles in blue to represent that. So when we look at these 3 wholes, what is the answer of 1/3 of 3? If you said 1 whole, you are correct. There is 1 full whole of the 3 wholes, 1/3 of 3. So now we're going to look at an equation that has two factors that are fractions. If you said 1/2 of 1/2, you are correct. 1/2 of 1/2, starting with 1/2. So I have a rectangle, and this is 1 whole. But we don't need 1 whole. We want to only look at 1/2 of the whole. So I represented that in this blue box again. So we have this blue box. And now, when we think about this equation, we're getting a part of a fraction. So how many parts do we need to break this 1/2 into? This is when we would look at that denominator, and we see that there is 2 parts that we want to break it up into. So if you thought of 2, you are correct. So I broke that blue part into 2. But do you realize I didn't just break that blue part into 2, I also broke this other half of the whole into 2 because we need to always make sure that we have equal parts of the whole. So we want 1/2 of 1/2. So we already broke it into 2 pieces. How many of those pieces though do we want? We're looking at the numerator now. If you said 1, you are correct. So what is this box representing? What fraction of the whole is it? If we have 4 parts and it's one of those parts. You said 1/4, you are correct. So the answer to this equation of 1/2 of 1/2 would be 1/4. So we have another whole number again. So we have 1/4 multiplied by 2. If you thought about 1/4 of 2, you are correct. How many wholes are we going to need? 2 would be the correct answer. And then now we look at the part that we need to take of that whole, and we see 1/4. So how many pieces do we need to break both of these wholes up into? We look at that denominator and it's 4. So that's why we broke up each of the wholes into 4 pieces. And now we want to look at that numerator. How many pieces are we going to shade in, or what are we looking for? It is 1, so I shaded in this first box in both of the holes. So we have 1/4 of one hole and 1/4 of the second hole. Now we just need to add these two up. So we have 1/4 plus 1/4 is 2/4. But is that in simplest form? The final answer should be 1/2. We are moving on to two factors that are fractions. If you said 1/4 of 1/2, you are correct. We're trying to look at a part of a fraction. We're only looking at 1/2 of it. So we have a half right here represented in this blue rectangle. So now we go back to the part that we're trying to find of this half. We see that it's 1/4. So that denominator shows us how many parts we need to break this 1/2 into. If you said 4, that's correct. And you see we broke the blue rectangle up into 4 pieces, but we didn't just break that blue part up. We made sure that the other half of that whole was also broken up so that we had 8 equal parts of the whole. So now we look back on this 1/4 and we look at that numerator. How many parts of these 4 equal parts do we have of 1/2? If you said 1, you are correct. I put that purple box around there. And that is 1/4 of 1/2. So looking at how many equal parts we have in the whole, what would our answer be? If you said 1/8, that is correct. We have 4 pieces broken up in this 1/2, and then we have 4 more pieces broken up in the other half of the whole. So this would be 1/8. Okay, so this website is called mathlearningcenter.org, and this is where you can work with the fractions and work with visuals. So I want to show you how it works. So first, I have this equation up here. It's 1/3 times 1/2, but we've already learned how can we rewrite that to help ourselves. If you said we can rewrite it like 1/3 of 1/2, you are correct. So what we're going to do now is we can go down to these 2 plus signs. There's a plus bar graph or fraction bar, and there is fraction circles. So whatever you prefer to use, you can use. But for today, I'm going to use the fraction bar. So first, we want to look at what we've been talking about through this whole lesson. What are we starting with? What is our fraction or whole that we're starting with? So it is 1/2. So first we need to break this fraction bar into 2 equal parts. And then we are only going to be working with that 1/2. So I am going to fill one side with these colors down here. If you click on them, you can fill different things in. So this represents my 1/2. And now we want to figure out how many parts of that 1/2 are we trying to find. So we look at this 1/3 and we see that the denominator is 3. So we want to break off this red half into 3 parts. But we can't just break this one red half into 3 parts. We also need to break the other blank half side into 3 parts. So how many total equal parts would we have? We have 3 on this side plus 3 on that side. If you said 6, that would be correct. So then I would grab another fraction bar and I would break it up into 6 pieces. And this is the cool part. I can put this directly over my 1/2. And now we see that this 1/2, the red shaded side, has 3 equal parts, and then we have 3 more equal parts to make sure that our whole has 6 equal parts. But now we look back at this 1/3. How many parts of that 1/3 do we want to be looking for? If you said 1, you are correct because it's 1/3. So we look at these 3 parts of the red, and I'm taking another color and I'm just going to represent that with an orangey color. So now we look at this fraction bar and this one yellow piece. What is that the answer to from the whole? We have 6 equal pieces. So that's 6 is the denominator and 1 is the numerator. So our answer to this problem would be 1/6. So 1/3 of 1/2 is 1/6. So this is just a great way to see visuals and work with these fraction bars, or even if you want to use the fraction circle to help you see these problems and hopefully help you throughout the unit.